And welcome into the Monday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Rexrode, still out there in Vegas. I think he's alive. He has been tweeting semi-frequently, so that tells me that he's at least alive as of yesterday. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keys are here with you on this Monday morning. TD, what's going on, man? How we doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing awesome. I'm very excited to do this. Chase gave me the call. I said, diggity, darn right.
That's right.
I'm ready to go.
That's right. TD is bringing the energy in the morning. He was so excited. He was up at 4:30. TD's got the passion today. I'm looking forward to it. Nick, what's going on? How we doing?
I was also up at 4:30. Just got back from St. Louis.
Yes, sir.
Good trip for the Preds, starting things off 5-2 over the Blues, and here we go with TD this morning. So glad to have you guys with us, and stay along for the ride because there's a lot for us to dive into.
There's a lot to get to. Was that the first time you have covered a road game?
That was the first time I've covered a road game. Not the first time I've been to a road game, but yes, cover, yeah.
What'd you think of St. Louis and the arena and all that stuff?
I enjoyed having one level to all of the media, so getting to see Hal Gill in all of his glory in the glass little box, there was that, and then you saw Pete Weber right there as well. Media row was awesome, loved it. Elevator, really big, took us all the way down there.
Was next to you the whole time?
Stilly was with me the entire time, eating candy and all the snacks, and I was sitting there with
firing people left and right.
Yep, sitting there with a cup of coffee, hearing
Fired
Jerry Stackhouse.
You should be fired. This bozo.
Oh, man.
Well, you should
Some things never change.
Teron, you should hear, we've got Mark from Nashville that calls in, and he goes, Baloney Head.
Yeah, Baloney Head is his new name, apparently. Yeah.
Good times.
I like that one.
I like it, too. I think it's got some staying power. We'll see what happens on that front. As Nick said, we got a lot to get to in the program today. Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio will join us at 7 o'clock. We'll get into the Preds with him, the win in St. Louis, the deadline coming up, and where things go from here. Corey Curtis from News 2 at 8 o'clock for his weekly visit. We'll get into all things Tennessee Titans with him. And, of course, as always, taking your thoughts all show long, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Now, TD, I know you were in the house for that 9-2 debacle that the Preds suffered last week.
Yeah.
It was I've covered hundreds upon hundreds of Predators games. I'm not sure I've ever seen one worse than that. So congratulations to you for being in the house and getting to witness that one because it was brutal. They come back on Saturday, and they respond 5-2. And it's just like anything, right? They've been up and down for basically the last month and a half. They've got some ground to make up in a playoff race here, but good at least to see a response on Saturday after you just get embarrassed at home on Thursday the way that they did.
Yeah, that was a complete embarrassment. I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, the most goals scored against them, at Bridgestone. So you have that, and it was just like they kept loading and loading and loading the wagon. And I said, well, let me check. And, okay, I didn't realize that Dallas was that much better than so many other teams. But I will say this, they kept fighting. They had a couple late goals there in the second period. And they even kept fighting literally, too. Yeah. So that was a good thing. But, yeah, it was an embarrassment. So for them to come back like that and respond the way that they did, that's absolutely necessary.
Well, they get the win against St. Louis, and that's a team that's right in front of them in the standings. And Luke Evangelista had a really nice goal, and Philip Forsberg with a big one. Luke Shen scores on Saturday. So they got some contributions up and down the lineup. And, look, they're still behind St. Louis in the standings. You look at the wild card race. It's going to be a kind of a dogfight for them coming down the stretch here. And, I said it last week. With the trade deadline coming up on March 8th, I would be selling if I were them. I still think when you look at the long-term, big picture in mind, you have to keep that in mind if you're Barry Trotz and the Predators. But certainly a big win for them, a nice win for them against St. Louis. And now this week, you've got L.A., you've got Vegas coming up tomorrow on the road. This is a big week for them on the road to see if they can rack up some points that way. So we'll see where they're at the playoffs as the playoff standings kind of come more into focus at the end of this week here. And like I said, Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio will join us coming up at 7 o'clock to get his perspective on all things Predators. The Vols over the weekend smoked Vanderbilt. I mean, they was rough for the doors, and Jerry Stackhouse kind of walking out of the press conference after the game. And look, I don't think anybody expected Vanderbilt to go on the road and take down Tennessee,
right,
based on the way that both of those teams have played this year. But where do you come down on the Jerry Stackhouse part of this? It's a fifth year into this. Obviously, it's not gone very well for Vanderbilt this year. They got 2 conference wins, and other than that, it's been pretty rough to watch from Vanderbilt for the most part. How do you view the Jerry Stackhouse part of this as he tries to close out his 5th year here at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I really look at it that way, and I give him another year. Because to me, okay, if you move on from him, what direction do you go, right? And also, I look at this from a recruit standpoint. If I'm a recruit and Jerry Stackhouse comes to my house, like, I'm going to take that a little bit more seriously, right? Because, chances are a recruit, their father is my age, right? And my age knows that Jerry Stackhouse was a nice player, a good player. And then you look at it, okay, you also remember his history coaching in the NBA. He had some, not a head coach, but he was an assistant coach there. So I'm looking at it from this perspective. Okay, this is a guy who clearly knows how to get to the league because he got there.
Yep.
And he coached there. And then he also has some cachet as far as the name is concerned. I would like my son to go there. You know what I mean? But it's just tough because if you pivot away from him, again, what direction do you go? Who is out there that's going to want to accept this job?
That's the thing. I mean, look, I think he's probably going to get fired at the end of the year because the noise is just so loud right now.
Well, that's a shame.
But I am interested in terms of, like, who are they going to hire? Like, who's going to be the one that looks at the Vanderbilt program and says, yep, I'm signing up for that right now. I don't know. I mean, look, maybe Candace Lee has a short list of candidates that she really feels good about. And look, maybe she won't fire him. I mean, that's just me purely speculating at this point that I think he's going to get fired at the end of the year. Maybe he's not. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But I'm with you in terms of, like, who's the next hire going to be and what does that look like. And then on the Tennessee front, they just continue to roll off wins, and at home they're playing at a different level right now. And it all at the end of the season comes down to the tournament, right, with them, right?
That's where I was going.
Rick Barnes, and they've been so successful in the regular season, but what can you do come tournament time? That's ultimately – look, Tennessee, I said this a couple weeks ago, TD, they don't have the basketball history on the men's side of things where people can just scoff at a regular season SEC title or an SEC tournament championship. Like, they're not to that level yet. So there are certainly things left here that they can accomplish that are realistic in front of them that are a big deal. Having said that, if you get to another tournament appearance and you're out in the second round, that's all people are going to remember about this team.
Exactly. And that is – it's like – that Grant Williams team is, in my opinion, like the last team that, made some noise, you know what I mean, in the SEC tournament. And conversely, I think the SEC tournament is going to be really big for Stackhouse and the crew.
Yeah.
And they finished 4th last year, I think it was?
I think so. They made a little run.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think if they can make another run like that, that could definitely save Jerry Stackhouse. I hope it does. But it's going to be pretty interesting watching how all that plays out because – that Vanderbilt, that program just overall sports-wise, it's kind of strapped, because of a lot of the requirements to get into the school, and everything there. Yep. But if you get in, you're in good shape. I will say that.
There's no question
my youngest daughter wants to go there, my
nice.
15-year-old.
Nice.
So, I've been saving.
That means she's a lot smarter than me.
Yeah.
The NBA All-Star game last night, TD. Ain't a whole lot of defense being played in that one.
No, it's like a game of horse, right? That's all you saw. Game of horse to see who could shoot. Did you well, I think it was Luka Doncic.
Yes.
Shot from, like, beyond half court.
Yes.
And there's like 30 seconds left. I'm like, bro, what are you doing, man?
Just pulling up from half court.
Final score. Got hot too.
Yeah, he did. Final score was 211 to 186 last night. The Eastern Conference takes down the Western Conference. We've talked about this before. Like, look, it's the All-Star game, so I don't expect – people to go out there and just, like, really try hard on defense. It is interesting, like, from the Pro Bowl, like, in the Pro Bowl, they've changed things up, obviously, and they've turned it into the flag football game, which, honestly, given what the Pro Bowl has been the last few years before this, I kind of have enjoyed the flag football game a little bit. I haven't spent a whole lot of time watching it, but when I flipped it over there, it's been okay. the Pro Bowl days, gone are the days when Sean Taylor's back there blowing up the punter. So
poor Brian Moore.
yeah, man, that was a bad one. But like just these All-Star games, they're a little bit of a tough watch right now, TD. I can't really bring myself to do it.
It is a bit of a tough watch. It's fun from the perspective of the dunks and stuff you see. You know what I mean? But you are right as far as like how it is as compared to the Pro Bowl. See, football is a game that can't be played half speed.
No.
Like, you play football one speed, full. That's it. Basketball, you can kind of fool around and shoot and have fun and all that stuff. I like the passing that you see, like the oops from half court and all that stuff. That's fun. But if you're a fundamental basketball fan, like you like the pick and rolls and you like those types of things, you're not going to see too much of that. But it's like a circus. That's more or less what it's like. Because you got these guys high flying, doing the dunks and shooting long range, and that's the fun part of it.
Karl Anthony Towns had 50 last night. He shot 35 times. No one else even approached shooting 35 shots in the All-Star game. So shout out to Karl Anthony Towns for making the most of the moment last night. We got a lot to get to on the program here today. We're going to get TD's thoughts on a lot of decisions upcoming this offseason for the Tennessee Titans. We'll have a Rob rant / TD rant at 7:45 that I'm looking forward to, so that one's going to be fun. And like I said, Alex Doherty at 7 o'clock, Corey Curtis from News 2 at 8 o'clock, taking your thoughts all show long. Coming up next, there is a glaring hole on the Titans roster, at least in my opinion, that needs to be solved this offseason. How would we go about doing it? We'll get into that coming up next. Take your thoughts as well on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, live from our Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Talking all things Titans, taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. So, TD, obviously, people have been talking about the draft around here basically since the second half of last season when it was clear the Titans weren't going anywhere, and we can get into the offensive line part of this a little bit later, which is certainly going to be important for the Titans. But at wide receiver, I still feel like there are some glaring needs that they've got at that position and some interesting potential ways that they can handle that. So, look, there's DeAndre Hopkins on the roster, and he was fantastic last season. We've talked about Treylon Burks, and we can get back into that here in just a few minutes. But I think everybody would agree there needs to be some adds there, whether that's in the draft, whether that's in free agency, maybe a combination of the two. And there's the T. Higgins part of this and what's going to happen with him in Cincinnati, and will there be a tag and trade? Is he going to play on the tag next year? There's the Brandon Ayuk situation in San Francisco, which is pretty interesting to monitor that one too. But there are going to be guys that are out there and available. What's going to happen with Tyler Boyd if they do get Higgins back in the fold in Cincinnati? And there's obviously going to be multiple receivers at the draft that you could target if you're the Titans, be that the first round, the second round, whatever it is. So, number one, how much work do you think needs to be put into the receiving room this offseason in terms of additions? And number two, what do you think the best strategy is? Not even going with like specific players if you don't want to, but what do you think the best strategy is if you're Rand Carthon and the Titans to addressing that this offseason with your second-year quarterback heading into next year?
Yeah, I think a lot of work has to go into this receiver core. I would say 3 players need to be added, and that's a combination of the draft as well as free agency. And obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is in the fold, more than likely going to be in the fold, because I know there's some contract things that could allow for him to move on if he chose to, or the Titans to move on if they chose to. I don't think either party should move on. They should stay together. But that being said, you have to adjust the roster, not just for D-Hop on the roster this year. You have to look at next year as well. And I think that's where the draft comes into play. So for me, obviously the T. Higgins thing, yeah, that's great. Listen, that's kind of like me saying I want to Aston Martin.
Yeah.
I could afford it, but it's going to put me in a bad situation.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think the same approach needs to be had towards T. Higgins. However, you look at another guy out of Cincinnati by the name of Tyler Boyd, who, granted, he's not going to come in here and catch 70 or 80 catches, but he is going to come in here and be a steady presence in this locker room, another veteran receiver for Treylon Burks to work alongside of a guy that Tyke Tolbert could work with as well, the receiver coach who was a darn good coach there. Mm-hmm. So I would look at signing Tyler Boyd. The projected contract is 3 years, $26.1 million. Now, he has 67 receptions, 667 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. But, again, it goes back to me looking at this from a locker room perspective and also looking at this from Brian Callahan's perspective. This is a guy that is very well-versed in Callahan's offense.
Yep.
Having that guy for the receivers would be huge. So I would sign him. 3 years, 26, that's a decent number. I would also look at – now you have the speed aspect that you need, right?
Yeah.
So, Hollywood Brown is a guy that is very intriguing. I don't know that I would go as high as the projected contract. I mean, he's projected to be in the 50 millions, right, at 4 years. I don't know that I would do that. However, I look at a guy like a Darnell Mooney, who, again, has ties to someone on the coaching staff. He played 2 years under Tyke Tolbert. Mooney is a guy, he's local. As far as local, he trained here with Derek Mason before the draft. He's not from here, but that's the local ties to me. I think you look at him, he 2 years ago, had a 1,000-yard season. He's a guy who could get vertical. He could also help you in a punt return game if you need it. I personally just have him, and I use him in a Khalif Raymond type of role, right, where you're my vertical guy. So you have that. Those are the two moves. Juwan Jennings is intriguing. He's a name that you're going to see, but he's a restricted free agent.
Right.
So I'm not sure what tender the 49ers are going to put on him, but I would probably stay away from that. If it's a lower tender, then I would look at it.
Yeah, I think so too. And the Niners, obviously, with the Ayuk situation, we're going to get into that coming up a little bit later in the show. But what's going to happen there? How does that influence the way that their roster kind of goes there and how they view Jennings and all those things? I'm with you. Go ahead. I mean, I think there's a lot of really intriguing options that are going to be available. And, of course, there's always one or two every offseason, TD, that come available that we don't know about right now.
Yeah, no, great point. But you mentioned the Ayuk one. That's a trade I make. I said T. Higgins is the Aston Martin. Well, Ayuk is the Camaro.
Yeah,
it's sitting out front there, right? A Camaro.
That's right.
That's the trade I make, man.
Dude, I mean, you're talking about 75 catches, 1,300 yards.
Yeah.
What do you have, 10 touchdowns last year? And look, I get it. He's in an offense where you've got Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, and there's a lot of weapons there. And, if he comes here, how would he do away from that offense? But watch the guy play. He's pretty darn good.
Absolutely.
Let's go.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to just go to Weston real quick, but if you got a thought,
let's go
go
to
ahead.
Weston. Let's hear.
Yeah, let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Weston. Weston, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, guys. And I'm hearing y'all's discussion on the upcoming draft philosophy and everything. Now, TD, this is more geared for you. Would you rather save as much of our free agency cap space as possible and spend that on the offensive line and go after your skill players in the draft to get them for a cheaper deal? Or would you rather spend that money and then go after offensive line in the draft? Because we're limited on money, and so I'm trying to figure out which would be the best way to spend it and where. Thanks, TD.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling, Weston.
Appreciate you, Weston. There's a story that I posted on ESPN.com about how to spend this $69+ million that this team has to spend. Weston, I believe the free agency market is better from a receiver perspective. Now, Robert Hunt from Miami is a guy that I would look at signing and have him be the right guard. So now that guard, center, guard, 2 of the 3 is geared. Look, Aaron Brewer, I like Aaron Brewer. Cool dude. He pushes hard. He's tough. I think you probably need to upgrade that position, though.
I would agree.
So that's a draft position that I would get, on late day 2, day 3. I personally feel that you go heavier wide receiver free agency than O-line.
Well, and to that point, I think it's easier to find wide receivers in free agency than it is top quality tackles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like very rarely, not never, but very rarely when you have a high-level left tackle specifically available, very rarely do they get to free agency. Teams like to lock those guys down. And look, we'll get into this later in the show too, but do the Titans take a look at right tackle as well this offseason? I mean, there's a lot of potential options that they have there, but I agree. You have to find, to me, a tackle in the draft, whether that's first round, second round, wherever it is. You've got to find a tackle in the draft. I mean, I think you've got to find at least one receiver in the draft too, but certainly there are more options available to you in receiver as opposed to tackle in free agency.
Amen to that. And, it's the same. Look, this draft is chock full of tackles as well.
Yep. We
could get into that. You mentioned the right tackle position. That's very intriguing because as you get into the bottom half of the first round, and we'll, again, talk about this later, but a lot of those prospects are right tackles.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting how they work that bottom of the first to the top of the second. I think, though, getting back to the receiver position, the draft is a great opportunity. And we have this repeat of what the Bengals had a couple years ago, right?
Yep.
It's Jamar Chase versus Penei Sewell. Now, the prospects aren't as grand as those two because you're looking at 2 of the best to come out in the last, 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely.
But you look at a Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze against a Joe Alt or Olufushano. Now, I will stand on top of this table and stomp on it and yell and scream about why you should take Joe Alt. If Joe Alt's there, period, you take him because you say, hey, here's number 76. You're going to play left tackle for 10 to 15 years.
Right.
And start looking for a house now in Brentwood or Franklin or wherever. You know what I mean? Because he's so plug and play. He's polished. In my opinion, even more than Marvin Harrison Jr., he is the most pro-ready player in this draft. And I will stand on that 10 toes.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say, if he's there, you take him.
Yeah.
But outside of that, now you're looking at, okay, do I want a playmaker that can make plays and score touchdowns on the outside like Brian Callahan wants? That's something to look at. But if you go Joe Alt, you got to come back in the second round, and you're looking at some of these guys: Xavier Legette, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Brian Thomas, Troy Franklin. Nobody's talking about Troy Franklin out of Oregon, and this guy can make plays. He's a vertical threat, so there's a lot to do there. Third round, you have other guys like I love Roman Wilson from Michigan. He's a vertical guy. You could get him, but what you do free agency is going to impact what you have to do draft wise, and that's why I think adding 2 to 3 free agents will put you in a position where I don't absolutely have to get this position now.
How much would you entertain bringing back a Chris Moore or an NWI to be in the room? I think everybody would agree. Like NWI, for what he is from a talent perspective, has probably made the most out of his career to this point, right? Like he's been super reliable. He does a bunch of different things for the Titans. In an ideal world, he's probably your number 4, your number 5, somewhere in that neighborhood, rather than your number 2 or 3.
Right.
And that's what you got to get to if you're the Titans, if you're bringing him back.
Yeah, and the thing is, he'll double as a gunner if you need him to. But guess what? Colton Dow is a talented player.
He is.
You still got to have him in the mix. And he could give you a vertical option possibly, but absolutely be that receiver / special teamer. So you have him. But Chris Moore, in my opinion, I think it is somebody that you should bring back because you saw the way he went up and fought for the football, man. There were times where it's like, don't throw it, don't throw it, don't throw it. He caught that.
It felt like once a game. Like it felt like once a game he did that. It was almost to the point where it's like, well, maybe throw it to him a little bit more. See what he can do. Yeah,
exactly. So I do look at it from that perspective with you. A couple other guys though, like you talk about sleepers in this draft, right? The guys day 3, down at the Senior Bowl, man. Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint. You want guys that can catch the football? 2 drops. 2 drops in his college career.
It's pretty darn good.
Now, 2.
Yeah.
That's it. And I watched him catch the ball in traffic. He scored the touchdown in the game. Spencer Rattler went vertical to him. The Georgia receiver is going to come in around 6'2", 200. He'll probably run like low 4.5s, high 4.7s, or 4.47s, like in that range.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah.
You got Javon Baker, UCF. He's a guy that is a route runner. He hit 21 miles per hour down at the Senior Bowl. So for those who question his speed, hey, man, he'll get a speeding ticket running through a
school zone,
man. Yeah. You know what I mean? I like that. Malachi Corey is another one. He's right down the street, Western Kentucky. Yeah,
I was going to say,
Nick's
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, he's one of those wide backs, right? He's like in the Deebo Samuel type of mode, a guy that, you just move him all over the place, jet sweeps and quick now routes and all that stuff.
TD, one thing I'll say about him super fast. He was Bailey Zappi's one of his favorite guys on the field. He was by far one of the go-to guys that he went to up at Western, and they had a great wide receiver staff.
Yeah. No, I mean, they've had consistently, they've had that, so those are a couple options. Punt returner real quick, because that's included in the receiver position.
Of course, yeah.
I go out and get Dev Duvernay.
Okay.
The Ravens just signed Nelson Aguilar to a 1-year deal. I believe they're going to bring back Tylan Wallace. I think Duvernay is going to become available. If he is, you get him, get that Texas State 100-meter champ runner back there fielding punts for you.
They've got to get some more speed in there. There's no question about that. So how would you handle the wide receiver position this offseason? We'll take your thoughts on that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. More coming up next here on Robby and Rexrode, 102.5-106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Got some tickets to give away. A pair of tickets to see Stained with Seether coming up at First Bank Amphitheater on Tuesday, April 23rd. Be caller number 3, 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. Caller 3 will win a pair of tickets to see Stained with special guest Seether at First Bank Amphitheater coming up on Tuesday, April 23rd. 615-737-1025. Taking your thoughts on the Titans. Skyler on the text line says, I'm thinking if Brock Bowers is there at 7, you almost have to take him. With that being said, is there hope for 6'7" Josh Wiley? If the Titans draft another tight end, it'd be the third one drafted in 3 years. This is from Skyler. What do you think of that?
Brock Bowers is intriguing.
He is.
He is. He's someone that I would definitely consider, but I just don't. You need more than that. And then also you look at the history of this offense. It's all about those guys on the outside that can make plays, and Brian Callahan has said that as well.
Yeah. How do you view the current tight end setup that they have with Okonkwo and Wiley? Obviously, two really young guys, and I did think Chig struggled at the beginning of last year.
Yeah,
I thought he got better as the season went on. Started to make some more plays. Didn't make the explosive plays that we saw at times from him in year one, but overall. How do you view that position right now for the Titans and where it's at?
I don't see it as much of an area for improvement or need as a lot of other people do. The texter mentioned Josh Wiley. I tell you what, when healthy, he's a nice big target, and he's one of those guys that you just got to get him in the groove, and he has to get that confidence side of things, that mental side of things, and I think he'll be fine. Chig, I'll remain higher on Chig than most. I've liked him as a prospect since, Maryland and into last year. It's a guy I pegged as someone that I was pretty sure that they would take. I think Chig still has plenty of playmaking ability. He's a guy you can move him all over the place. I don't think you have to. Now, Brock Bowers is this is a different.
Sure.
He's a George Kittle, type tight end. You know what I mean? So if you could get it, yes, but I don't think that it is mandatory for that tight end room.
Well, what's interesting about where they're at in the draft is what happens if Joe Alt is off the board by the time their pick rolls around, and it's
Cry.
well, it's the first thing you do, and let's say there's some combination of Bowers, Odunze. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that I guess Neighbors and Odunze both will still be there at that point, but depending on how the quarterbacks fall before that, maybe they will be. Yeah. What if you have your selection of all of those guys, those three guys specifically, Odunze, Neighbors, and Bowers, what do you do with it if you're the Titans there?
Odunze, Neighbors, and Bowers, I'm going Neighbors, man. I like guys that I could just, take this 2-yard catch and go run 70 for me.
He's good.
I'll probably go him out of those guys. But I tell you another one that could be in the mix, though, is Olu Fashanu.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you have a coach, a position coach like Bill Callahan, and you mix that with a 20-year-old prospect that has plutonium-level potential, you know what I mean? And even at this point with the potential, the upside that he has, he still is a pretty solid player. That's something you consider also.
Well, there are people that think that he's got the most upside from a tackle perspective in the draft, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Jim Nagy, he actually – told me that he feels Tyler Guyton has the most upside. Now, I will say this. I saw him flip to the left side in one-on-ones. Wasn't too pretty. But you put him on the right side, you got something.
So, on the Will Levis front, TD, obviously, everything we're talking about right now is to try to help Will Levis and to equip him to have the best season he can possibly have next season. And you've got to make the right decisions if you're Carthon and Callahan and these people to put the right players in place.
Right.
But based on what you've seen from Levis to this point, what do you like? What do you think needs to be worked on the most from Will Levis heading into year 2? Where are the areas do you think he can improve the most heading into next season?
I think his pocket awareness has to go up just a little bit because there's too many times where that backside, the blind side pressure, and you're like, throw it, move, do something. You know what I mean? Because you see that guy. It's like in the movies, right, where you don't hear the crowd, all you hear is, and the guy's running at him, and next thing it's like, you know what I mean? That's what you hear and what you see. So you want to get that pocket presence a little bit better. I think another thing is he does have to start being a little more careful with the football. I will say he is living right because there's a lot of times where he's thrown passes and it's like, that should have been picked off,
Yeah,
and it was. You look at the Tampa game, he had like 3 or 4 should have been interceptions.
Yeah.
So I think he has to do that. But overall, like I think this guy is really going to stand to improve, working with this coaching staff that has been brought in. And I love the way that he is he's tough. He loves to push the ball down the field. But the thing, and there goes Chris Moore catching a nice deep over route there. I got the Dolphins and Titans game on.
Speaking of Will Levis.
Right. And now, see, the thing that I like about him is he could drive that ball and that deep dig, that 15 or 20 yards middle of the field and put it on the money. He pushes it down the field as well as anybody. So you do have those things. I just would like to, like I said, see him just that toughness. You got to corral that some, right? You don't always have to live to see another play, right? To use some of the sayings, understand when the journey's over. And I think that's something that with time he'll be able to discover.
Well, and I'm excited. If you're a Titans fan, I think it's really exciting. Obviously the hire that they've made with Brian Callahan, and we'll see what he's like as a first-time play caller and what that looks like on game day and how that kind of manifests itself within the offense here. But I think you've got to be excited about, number one, his background and the quarterbacks that he's worked with.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, now his father coming over to help out with the offensive line and everything that goes in with that. And I was impressed. Will Levis was not perfect, and obviously the conditions around him were not great last season. And to be able to overcome that to some degree and play as well as he did at times, I thought was really encouraging. Like you said, I mean, there's plenty of things to work on if you're him. The one thing that I love about him, if you're a Titans fan, I think is clearly like the mental side of things and the mentality and the approach. Mm-hmm. Like all that's there with it. I remember when Marcus was here and everybody was talking about like just the has to lead the same way, but you don't worry about any of that with Will Levis. Like Will Levis, you don't have any concerns about that part.
No concern. Well, you heard Arden Key. He was like, man, he's a dog.
Yeah.
Right? It was that Monday. I think it was after this game. I think it was after the Dolphins won. He just trucked Jalen Ramsey, by the way. No, you got all of that with him, the vocal part of it. And I was really impressed with that, just the way that he was willing to, call guys out.
Yeah.
As a rookie, a guy who didn't start till week 8, you know what I mean? It didn't matter to him. He was in the position, and he was willing to step up and be a leader, and that's what you want. Like, it's natural for him, and I really think that's really good for the franchise.
We'll take your thoughts on Will Levis, 615-737-1025. Where does he need to improve the most heading into year 2? We'll take your thoughts on that. Also, there's a very intriguing question on the text line that I want to get TD's thoughts on as well coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. We'll have Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio coming up at 7 o'clock. We'll get into the Predators, their win against the St. Louis Blues with him coming up here in about 15 minutes. Right now, taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025, our phone number. Ed on the text line with an intriguing question that I want to get TD's thoughts on. Who's got a better chance to be a reclamation project next year in this offense? Traylon Burks or Nicholas Petit-Frere? What do you think of that? Traylon Burks or Petit-Frere?
I like the question. We're going to get into MPF a little bit later. I would say Traylon Burks. I think Traylon Burks is very talented. I think he's a guy that you just have to figure out ways to get him the football early and consistently. I know that they dialed up plays for him last year where he was the read, but for whatever reason, the quarterbacks had to go away from him. But, yeah, I would say Traylon Burks. I think he has more potential for a breakout or a bounce-back type of year. I don't know for sure that Petit-Frere is going to be more than a swing tackle, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. On the Burks front, the change in philosophy, the change in coaching staff, like if you're a Titans fan, other than Levis, like you're hoping that nobody else probably benefits from that more than Burks, right?
Yeah.
It's a first-round pick, and again, it's not gone well to this point. The injuries have been a big part of it, but he's not made enough plays when he has been out there and has been available on the field for whatever reason.
He's inconsistent.
He's very inconsistent, and you got to find a way to harness that. Like, is he ever going to be worthy of a first-round pick at this point? I have my doubts about that. But at this point, like if he turns into a reliable receiver for you, I'd take that if you were the Titans. Like he doesn't have to be your number one option. I would take him being a really good number 3 right now if I were the Titans. But I think the coaching change, like I would assume like if you're Brian Callahan and you're watching tape on him and you see the measurables, you're like, yeah, I can work with this guy. Like the athletic ability that he brings to the table. And we've seen it sometimes, like in games, right? I think of the Green Bay game a couple years ago where he Randy Mossed, Jair Alexander out there and played great in that game.
Yeah, man, Jair, that's my boy, man.
Yeah, I know it.
Why you do that, Jay?
I know it. I know it. And he's, the Charger game last year made the big play down the field, which was really his biggest play of the year, one of his only big plays that he made last year. So, like, it's frustrating from that standpoint because – you watch him in camp, you hear about the camp that he's having, and then it just didn't really translate to the field after that injury in Minnesota in practice. And, like, if you could get that unlocked from him this year, how much would that change the conversation of the whole offense?
It changes it drastically because now you have that playmaker down the field, that playmaker that catch and run. He brings all of that together. That's what he does. Now, I mean, he's not going to run an extensive route tree, but – for the things that you have him do, he is capable of doing it well.
I got a texter that says, everybody knows that the Titans' offensive line isn't very good, but Will Levis has to know how to slide, quit taking unnecessary hits, and getting rid of the ball, taking sacks 8 to 9 times a game.
That's exactly what we discussed during the segment and also during the break, right? Yeah. When he tried to, make his way into – listen, Tina Turner made a song about it. You'd like to hear it? Here it goes. We don't need another hero. He has to listen to that and understand that. You know what I mean? They don't need a hero every single play. Sometimes the journey's over and understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because Tannehill, when he first took over, was kind of the same way too, right, in terms of, like, learn how to slide. Like, there was this nice mic'd-up moment of Vrabel be like, hey, yeah, don't do that again. Slide.
Yeah.
Make sure you get on the ground. And, like, Levis – It's an interesting balance with the quarterback position because you don't want to take away what makes them great, right, and their aggressiveness and their mentality and all those things. But it's also the balance of all that's great, but your aggressiveness doesn't do us much good when you're sidelined for 4 weeks with a separated shoulder over there. So figuring out like that part of it and when to do that and when not to, it's hard to explain. But most of like the great quarterbacks know that timing. Like Mahomes does a great job. He's great at everything, obviously. But he does a great job of escaping the pocket. He knows when to get down. And then in the playoffs in the Super Bowl, the final drive, you saw him lower the shoulder and get across the line there. Like the timing of when to do that is really important.
Sometimes you just got to do it. And it's just
not everybody's Josh Allen.
it's just so frustrating for defenses though when you have a guy like Mahomes, Lamar, or it's 3rd and 13. It's beautifully covered. Like the DBs are plastered to everybody. It's man coverage. Back is to the line of scrimmage. The quarterback slips out, runs 14 yards and steps out of bounds.
Yep.
Nobody got to hit him. You see the defense, it's all exclamation points and hashtags and all that, because there's cursing going on after the play. There it goes.
Yeah, it was just perfect on the screen there. Good. So the interesting part about the Levis thing too, TD, is obviously the 2nd round pick. So there's no 5th-year option for him. So like in a perfect world, by the end of his 3rd season, you'd probably like to know like where you're going with him, right? So you've got this year and you got next year, and at that point you'd really like to have a decision of, all right, this is our guy, or maybe he's not, and we need to look elsewhere, quarterback wise when it comes to Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon, and the future here. Again, last year, this Miami game they're showing right now on the NFL Network, some great moments in that game. Obviously leading them back and winning the game that way. His debut went about as well as it could go against the Falcons. There are plenty of positives to take away from last year. But I do in the back of my mind wonder, like, if you're the Titans and you can get these offseason discussion and decisions that we've talked about right, how much of a real evaluation can you get of Levis? Because if you give him pieces around him, C.J. Stroud was great. And C.J. Stroud made some throws that were just ridiculous, and everybody feels great about C.J. Stroud moving forward, and they should. But his offensive line played well. He had some really good receivers last year, including some guys that a lot of people didn't know about heading into the season that came out of nowhere and played great. Like if you could get the right weapons around Will Levis to give him kind of a true evaluation of what he is with competent skill players and with a competent offensive line, that goes a long way towards figuring out what he really is at this point.
And that's important. It's important to get that because that's kind of been the – I don't want to say excuse, but that's been – I'll say the word excuse. You look at a lot of these guys who didn't pan out, and that's what you say, you got to get him this. You got to get him that. Quarterbacks outside of Mahomes are only as good as the supporting cast, so you definitely have to make that a better situation for him. And, I mean, for what he dealt with last year, I mean, it's a crime to have to go out there and play quarterback behind that offensive line and with those limited options. So I definitely think that's where it's important to get this receiver core right, get this O-line right. It doesn't have to be Dallas Cowboys in the 90s level protection or anything like that. It doesn't have to be, whatever wide receiver core you want to point to, but it does have to be solid and give this man a chance for success.
Well, and the ultimate hope is, again, you're trying to be as good as you can be everywhere on your roster, but the ultimate hope is that your quarterback is good enough where he can elevate some of those guys too.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know who was elevating that group they had last year. Maybe Mahomes, I guess, could have done it with the offensive line and receiving core that they had, but there's no question, like, to get a better evaluation of what he is, you've got to upgrade around him. And look, the Titans have cap space to do it. They have draft capital to do it this year, and now it comes down to Rand Carthon and his staff making the right decisions this offseason.
Yeah,
it's a huge offseason in terms of the trajectory of where this franchise is going.
And you talk about evaluation. Rand Carthon will be able – you can evaluate him after this year.
For sure.
All this, he's a savior, and all this, he's Satan. Throw it all out. Like it's 1 year. You know the different things that were going on, but I think you could really start to grade Rand after what happens this offseason.
Yep, I think that's a great point. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio. We'll get his thoughts on the Predators. They had a big win against the St. Louis Blues over the weekend. We'll look at what that means for the playoff race, the trade deadline, all those things coming up next. Make sure you check out Nashville's best deal of the week. It's Bavarian Beer House, conveniently located at Opry Mills Mall. Enjoy beer, food, music, and fun at Nashville's only authentic German beer hall, where it's Oktoberfest every single day. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals to get a $50 gift card for only $25 to Bavarian Beer House while supplies last. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. And we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our friend Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio. Preds with a 5-2 win against the St. Louis Blues on Saturday. Alex, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, TD?
Hey, I'm doing really well, man. It's good to talk some shot with you, Alex, for sure.
That's right.
So, Alex, obviously, the team gets embarrassed on Thursday at home against Dallas, 9-2, and TD and I were talking about that earlier. I mean, that was about as rough as it gets for the Predators on Thursday against the Stars. They respond on Saturday, get the win on the road against St. Louis. So I guess heading into this week where you got a bunch of tough games on the road and you're 2 points out of a playoff spot right now, what do you make of kind of the trajectory of the way that they've been playing, and how big do you think that win Saturday can be for them as they head into a week of really tough tests on the road here coming up?
Well, I probably like some people, I had a feeling this was going to happen, right? Like I knew that after last week, I just had a feeling that they were going to go on the road and find a way to get a win against St. Louis, because it just feels like that's how this team has done. That's what this team has done all year. They've had, 2 bad losses and then followed it up with a good win, or they've had a loss and a win, a loss and a win. That's just been how this team has gone all year. So my answer to your question is I don't think it really affects much at all, because I just don't think that this team is built to compete over the long haul for the whole season. I mean, look, there was a nice run there in November and December where they were winning a bunch of games and everything, all the vibes were good. But I think we just, like you and I have talked about, Robby, this team just doesn't really have the horses, right? It's not a team that's built to succeed in the long run. They're going to win a couple games here and there. They're going to lose some. And then, they might make it at the very end. They could squeeze into the playoffs, but the way this team is constructed is just it's not in the cards, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a question that I want to ask you, because with the trade deadline, less than a month away, is this a team that you think should be selling? And if so, is Alexandre Carrier, is he one of the guys you think they should move?
Yeah, I do think they need to sell. Carrier's name has come up recently. I think the problem is they've got a lot of guys that they could move. It's just kind of tricky to figure out, like, where could they possibly go, and also what kind of value do they have? Alex Carrier might be one of the better ones that has value. I mean, him or Fabro would probably bring the biggest return out of the UFAs that they have. I mean, the UFAs they have are not they're not names that really impress a lot of people. I mean, Jakob Trenin, Kiefer Sherwood. Of course, Novak is probably the best forward, but he's had a strange year. Gurionov is another one, but Alex Carrier as a UFA is probably the one that could bring the biggest return. But we're not talking about a huge haul for Alex Carrier. I mean, like, he's a UFA, so it's not like they're getting anything. It's just a rental, a depth defenseman rental. I mean, what, like 5th round pick, 6th round pick? I mean, we're not getting a lot out of Alex Carrier. So. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, this team is not really in a great position to either build for the future or compete this year right now. So, I think that's why people are looking at the big moves, like the UC Saros move is a big one people are focusing on. And I just don't see that happening in season either. I mean, like, that's a big one too. But, Carrier, I think he could definitely be moved. But if people are expecting some big haul for Alex Carrier, I'd be prepared to be disappointed.
So, Alex, to that point, I mean, I agree with you. I think they should sell. I don't know that Barry Trotz has totally made that decision yet, but I think when you get beat the way that they got beat at home in the New Jersey game and then certainly the Dallas game last week, it has to get the wheels turning at least a little bit there. So is there anything, barring like a 6-game run here where they just roll off wins left and right, is there anything you think this team can still do that convinces Barry Trotz not only to not sell, but to become maybe a small buyer at the deadline? Or do you think, regardless of what happens from here until March 8th, that Barry Trotz is going to have the idea of selling in the back of his mind?
Yeah, I cannot see it. I cannot see them being buyers. I mean, look, this is that was kind of the David Poile. I think we're kind of maybe conditioned to the David Poile way of things, right? Like, where that was how many years in a row did that happen with David Poile, where it was like they would go on a little run, UC Saros would get hot, and then he'd be like, "Okay, well, we're gonna buy, and we're gonna go get a couple pieces here," and people were just like, "It really did not. We're not all about that." I think that Barry Trotz. We don't know exactly how he's going to handle this, but I just get the impression he's going to handle it a little differently. I mean, we all saw the reports about the recent travel change plans from Trotz. I think definitely he's willing to try anything. I mean, like, that guy definitely does not want to sit back and just let it all happen. So I don't know, maybe, but I really can't see it. I cannot see him being a buyer, regardless of how this next couple weeks goes.
You mentioned it. What do you make of these change in travel plans? What do you make of that?
I thought that was probably one of the most hilarious things that I've ever seen a GM do. I mean, like, so there was kind of a rumor going around that, like, some plans have been changed at practice on Friday. I was trying to talk around and figure out exactly what had happened, and confirmed that, like, the plans were. I was able to confirm that the plans were changed, but not who changed them or why. And it was kind of a strange feeling because Friday's practice was a doozy. I mean, they were skating like crazy.
That'll happen when you get beat 9-2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not surprised, but yeah, definitely that's what happens. And Brunette after the game was like, like if you get a spanking as a kid and the dad comes and says, like, that hurt me more than it hurt you, son. That's the impression I got from Brunette. He was like, I didn't want to do that either, but we had to do it. And so I think that Barry Trotz, deciding to cancel the U2 trip to the Sphere, I think is like similar. It's like, I'm going to turn this plane around, and unless you act right, this is the new age of Barry Trotz as the GM. So I don't have a problem with it. I think it makes perfect sense to say we're gonna take the hockey part of this seriously, and that was the impression I got from Brunette, all week, that he did not think his team was taking the game itself as seriously as everything else.
Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio with us. So, Alex, to that point, I think the Predators deserve full credit for the way that they came out on Saturday and responded and getting that win on the road in St. Louis. A St. Louis team that's played really well. I think that's a really good response from them after what we saw last week. Now, having said that, this team's been all over the map, as you pointed out, and they've had multiple performances this year where they've either just come out flat and gotten run out of the building in the first period, or a couple lately that have just been brutal from start to finish. And I do wonder, like, the offseason, Duchesne's out, Johansson's out, and they bring in O'Reilly, they bring in Luke Schenn. Barry Trotz has spoken glowingly about Ryan McDonough while he's been here and all those things. And a lot of the talking point was like the serial winners and the culture pieces, right? And to have Andrew Brunette talk about the approach and be as frank as he's been after some of these games is a little bit surprising to me that that's been the case with this group, given that the emphasis was supposed to be kind of setting that culture piece, right? So what do you make of kind of those two different things of bringing in a lot of guys who have won a lot of hockey games before and have been a part of those winning environments, and how do you explain having that and having some of the absolute duds in approach that it feels like they've had so far this year?
Yeah, that has been very surprising. I think that's probably what Trotz and Brunette are dealing with right now as the guys in charge, because they're like, why is this not working like we thought it was? Because these are the guys we brought in to not have this happen. And Brunette said as much after the game on Thursday, I guess after the 9-2 loss, when asked about if he's disappointed in the leadership, the captains, and letting this kind of thing happen. And he said it's disappointing, and he's tired of having to keep going back to it. And at some point, the message is not getting through. Yeah, I think they're probably frustrated with that. I think the only thing I would point to is the veterans that he got, other than O'Reilly, are not the kind of guys that are like the biggest difference makers on the ice. Now, like Luke Schenn, I mean, he had that big hit on Liam O'Brien that got everyone crazy, but I mean, he's not the kind of guy that is going to take over a game, right? He's not that difference maker. Same thing with Gustav Nyquist. and other players he got. It's just they didn't transform the game on the ice either. I mean, they transformed the locker room, sure, but they didn't do a lot to make the team, faster or more skilled or anything. So I think that's the problem. The team has been in shambles kind of since January 1. Like, there's a lot of problems. The special teams have gone in the tank, and power play and penalty kill are both in the bad. So they're having to fix that at the same time. They just have a lot of things going poorly right now. The continued struggles of UC Soros is just baffling to figure out why. So there's just a lot of things. I think they're probably the most frustrated about is the leadership not preventing things like that from happening.
You mentioned the leadership. You mentioned all of these problems and all of these issues. It's pretty clear, like, this year you could kind of put a bow around it. It's put a fork in it. It's done. But what direction does this organization go after this year? What hope do look, I'm talking Titans.
Freudian slip.
What hope do Predators fans have, with everything that's going on?
Well, you mentioned Titans. Okay, so like the Titans made all these huge changes, right? They already did the coaching change, and they've basically turned over their whole staff. Well, the Predators have already done that, right? They've already made that move. They can't do that again. So, at least I don't think. I think that they just have to slowly start to work in some of the talent that they like down in Milwaukee. Some of the top prospects that they've drafted the last couple of years need to start contributing. I think that you're going to see some turnover. I mean, the UFAs I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of guys on this team that probably aren't going to be here next year. I'm just going to say a guy like Jakob Trenin. Good guy, 27 years old. He's good defensively, but that's a guy that I just don't see being a part of Brunette's team moving forward. It's going to be a lot of that. It's going to be a lot of guys that are just have been good pieces, some depth guys here and there, but that Brunette is just going to say, look, this guy's not my guy, and I'm going to move on. And it's going to continue to be his team. I think his style, his offense, and everything is going to continue to take the lead in how he decides to build this roster. But yeah, you're going to see some turnover. Roster turnover, I think, is the biggest thing. I think it's all about the players at this point. The players are not producing. I don't think you can make any leadership or staff changes at this point to make a difference. You got to start changing the room up.
Alex, last thing for you here. So Jordan Bennington gets fined for high-sticking Luke Evangelista in the face, and you were pointing that out on Twitter. And it seems like you've become public enemy number one in the city of St. Louis. How's that feel?
Yeah, I feel like I've talked to everyone in the rural Missouri area about Jordan Bennington now. Basically, everyone thinks that I've never watched hockey before. I have no idea who the St. Louis Blues are. I also haven't won any Stanley Cups personally, so that makes a big difference. Just simply putting a little clip out there of Jordan Bennington, obviously high-sticking Luke Evangelista, which he got fined for by the league, so it's not like that was crazy here.
There is that.
Yeah, St. Louis is not a big fan of me right now. That's for sure.
Well, Alex, great stuff. We are big fans of you here on the program. Appreciate you taking time to be with us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Y'all take it easy.
Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your reaction to the Preds. They get the win on Saturday. On the road. And how do you view the NHL trade deadline part of this? Is Barry Trotz's mind already made up? Should it already be made up? We'll take your thoughts on all that. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, the game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Appreciate Alex Doherty from Penalty Box Radio for being with us in the last segment. The Preds get a big win over the weekend against St. Louis, 5-2. So a nice response for them after they got their butts kicked on Thursday against the Stars. Still sets up basically in the same spot they've been for the past couple of weeks, which is right there on the playoff bubble. They're 2 points back of St. Louis in the wild card race, and now this week is a big week. You look at the schedule, they're going to be on the road all week. They got Vegas coming up tomorrow, which Vegas is obviously a very tough place to go play and to go win. Those guys are the defending Cup champions. LA after that on Thursday, who has fired their coach and is playing better. And now that they've fired their coach, they're ahead of the Predators in the standings as well. And then a back-to-back this weekend against two of the worst teams in the league in San Jose and Anaheim. So, to me, TD, if you're going to stay in the playoff race, the games at the end of the week are non-negotiable. You got to find a way to win against San Jose and Anaheim. You can't be dropping games to teams that you have no business losing to at this point. Vegas and LA, a little bit of a different story. That's going to be a really tough challenge. And speaking of Vegas, so if you missed it, Elliot Friedman over the weekend reporting on Hockey Night in Canada that apparently the Predators had a trip scheduled to go see U2 in concert at the Sphere. And I guess they were going to end up there yesterday, so they're in St. Louis. My guess is they were going to fly out to Vegas and go see the concert before getting prepared for Vegas this week. And with the way that they played last week, apparently that trip just got canceled. And Alex Doherty talked about it in the last segment of there was some scuttlebutt that the travel plans were getting switched up a little bit on Friday at practice, and apparently Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz basically looked at the Predators and said, "You know what? You're grounded. We're not going to see you two. We're not doing that at the Sphere." What'd you think of that? Yeah. I don't know that I can recall that happening before.
I would imagine if that were the case, if that was a decision that they made, I would imagine that decision was made after the 9-2 loss, where it's you know what?
Probably so.
You guys, it's one of the ones where, in the old man, they get frustrated. They do this one that's that. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I think that might have been what happened there. And then they bounced back and they had to win against the Blues. And it was okay, but you still aren't going. I think that's probably the case.
Yeah, it's a very Barry Trotz thing to do from the standpoint of Barry Trotz has got a lot of the old school, no nonsense way of doing things, and he's been beloved by players everywhere he's been, whether he was coaching here in Washington or in New York. But he is also a guy if things aren't going well and you're not putting in the effort or doing the things that you need to be doing, he's not afraid to call you out, whether that's in the team, in the media, whatever it is. And it is that approach has been honestly kind of refreshing this year between Brunette and Trotz of just the willingness to call your players out and to kind of change things up that way. And it's clear, and you could take this to really any sport. When you're coming into a team and you're trying to revamp whatever culture was there, and I'm interested to see how this goes with Callahan and the Titans too, taking over for Vrabel. Not that I think Vrabel was some unmitigated disaster there, but when you're coming in trying to establish your own way of doing things and your own work environment of the expectations that you have, sometimes coming in and laying down the law is the only way to get people's attention, and that's apparently what Barry Trotz is doing.
Yeah, sometimes you have to drop that hammer and just let them know from the jump, I'm nothing to be played with. And I think that's what you're seeing. It just this organization is just it's kind of caught in no man's land. It's okay. Yeah, you make the playoffs. All right, that's great, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And then it's you don't make the playoffs. Okay, well, you have a lot of issues to fix. So it would be tough to be a fan of this team right now because it just the direction just seems to be just wandering in a forest somewhere. That's the problem.
It kind of feels like you've been there for a while too, right?
Yes.
And the question is how do you get out of it? And I thought Jared did a pretty good job of laying this out the other day, and I mostly agree with what he was saying in terms of you have players on your team that are good enough to where you're not going to be terrible, right? You're not going to be picking in the top 5 and having a chance to, in last year's case in the draft one of these generational guys. You're also, you don't have enough good players where you can, even if you make the playoffs, seriously challenge to compete and win a cup. So, it's a really tough place to be because you're not bad enough to get, those franchise-changing, game-breaking players to accelerate the rebuild, and you're not good enough to where you can, maximize your Forsbergs and your Yossi's and your Saroses and guys that you have available to you right now. So that's the challenge for Trotz is how do you dig your way out of that? What do you do to dig your way out of that?
Well, let me ask you: do you blow it up? Do you trade Saros? And
I would.
Really?
I would trade him.
So you blow everything up?
I would blow it up to the extent that you can. I think they started to do it last year, right? They moved out Ekholm and Granlund, and they got some big cap numbers off their books, which is good. And they've got some cap space heading into this summer. I agree with Alex, though, from the standpoint of even some of your younger guys that fans would probably look at and say, okay, well, we'll see what they look like here in a couple years. I think there are some of those guys that won't be here next year. I think Barry Trotz is going to want to bring in more of his people. A lot of these guys that we're talking about right now, I mean, not a lot of them, all of them, when you're talking about the young guys, he didn't draft any of them. They're not his guys. So I think part of this year is evaluating, okay, who are guys that I feel good about moving forward with in the future, and who are guys, even if they are 23, 24, 25 years old, that we got to get out here to move away from. I think especially in a league like the NHL, TD, where there's a hard cap and it's not as maneuverable as it is in the NFL.
Right.
When you get yourself out of cap trouble, you got to be really careful after that about who you give your next contracts to. You got to be really selective with, all right, I feel great about this guy giving him a 4-year deal and this guy giving him an 8-year deal. And you're not going to hit on all the contracts. There are going to be some that you sign that you regret signing the moment after you do it. And that's the name of the game in the NHL.
Yeah.
But I think you got to be really selective, especially in a league that's got a hard cap of who you're giving these next deals to. And I think you are going to see Barry Trotz change the roster over. And I will say, I know Alex said that he didn't think it's going to happen, and I would probably lean it not happening before the deadline, maybe something you revisit in the summer. But if I was Trotz, I'd look at moving Saros right now.
All right, so let me ask. I agree with you there, but let me ask you this because you have Rand Carthon who is in the job for 11 months, and people are calling for him to be fired.
Yep.
Right. If Barry Trotz, if he does this, blows it up, how much time do you think he has to orchestrate his plan?
Well, that's the thing. I think number one, the Predators ownership group is unbelievably patient, which is why when you look at the history of their franchise, they've had, at this point, 4 head coaches and 2 general managers over a 25-year period. Mm-hmm. You don't find that a whole lot in professional sports. So I think he's going to have some time to restructure this thing. I think if you're a Predators fan, this is why some of the reaction this week, and it reminds me a little bit of the Rand Carthon thing, people ready to run him out of town already. After the 9-2 game, I had people in my mentions all over the place talking about firing Andrew Burnett. And I'm like, guys, he's been the coach for half a season. Can we get past half a season before we start doing some of this stuff? I think if you're a Predators fan, and I talked about this on Friday, everybody wanted to blame everything that went wrong on the Predators the last couple of years on the last coach. And I've tried to tell people for years, it's not that simple. Was it time to move on from John Hines? Yes. Was it time to go find a new head coach and a new way of doing things? Yes. But this roster has been in rough shape and on the decline for a while. And I think it's going to be a 2 to 3 year fix if you do it right, unless there's some gigantic trade opportunity that just opens up for you. If you do it right, it's probably going to be a 2 to 3 year fix before they're back to being clearly on the path where they can compete for a title again. And I think people got to accept that if you're a Predators fan. It's hard to do.
Patience. Sometimes it will pay off, but, you got to have it.
Coming up next, there is a pretty intriguing situation regarding a high-level wide receiver in the NFL that could really influence the way the receiver market goes this offseason. I want to get TD's thoughts on that coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. I don't know if there's a combo between you and Rexrode of bigger Wu-Tang fans anywhere in America than there is on this program right here.
Absolutely, man. I'm a Wu warrior, man. I tell you what. My poor girl, man. I feel so bad for her. So we had a getaway. We stuck to Atlanta this weekend, right? Coming back, I played nothing but Wu. She had to listen to the whole Old Dirty album. 4.5 hours. She had to listen to Raekwon, the Jizza, Inspector Deck. Like, I know she was sick of me, but, you know.
Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
She dealt with it, man.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. I respect it. I think we need a little bit more, Nick. Just keep it coming on the show.
Little more. Let it roll. Let it roll.
Just keep it coming on the show.
You got to be careful with the Wu, though, because, you know, every once in a while, a little bit of that colorful language comes out.
You have to keep your
we have to
head on a swivel.
PC friendly here.
That's right. There's no question about it. So, TD, we talked about the wide receiver plan for the Titans earlier and the different options that are out there and available to them this offseason. And one name that is going to be intriguing to see what happens here is Brandon Ayuk out of San Francisco. Now, you know, after the Super Bowl, you know, Ayuk had 3 catches in the Super Bowl, obviously a heartbreaking loss for the Niners. And you had, you know, members of his family and like his girlfriend putting up, you know, those cryptic messages on Instagram about, well, that's why he's going to be out of here. We're hitting the road, basically indicating that a trade is coming, which God bless our world in 2024 that continues to be a thing. He was asked about it in their kind of end-of-season press conferences, and he said all the right things about wanting to be in San Francisco. He's under his 5th-year option heading into next year. I would assume if you're him, though, you're looking at the work that you've put in, the production that you've had, and you want a long-term deal. You're 4 years into this. You're a guy that for the last 2 years has been over 1,000 yards, over 70 catches, 8 touchdowns 2 years ago, 7 touchdowns this past season. So pretty darn consistent, pretty darn good for San Francisco these past 2 years. And if it does get to the point with him where he either wants to move on or forces a trade, whatever it looks like, and they decide that Brandon Ayuk is not somebody they want to commit money to long term, then I would imagine there are going to be quite a bit of suitors interested in him. And obviously a natural connection here with Rand Carthon, his history with that organization, and obviously he would know Brandon Ayuk very well. So, number one, what do you think of that situation as a whole in San Francisco? How do you think it ends up playing out? And number two, should he become available, how much consideration are you giving that if you're the Tennessee Titans to throw your name in the hat to bring in Brandon Ayuk?
I think the situation there in San Francisco is very interesting because here you have a guy, Brandon Ayuk quietly is capable of being a number 1 receiver in this league. You look at the routes that he runs, it's right there. You look at even – well, it's a different regime now, but if this was Mike Vrabel and the crew, they would love him too because he blocks down the field. So you have that. I just think the vertical aspect as well, like everything you want in a receiver he brings outside of being 6'3", 200 and something pounds, but he still does it with his smaller frame. So when you look at this situation, he is a small cog in a big piece as far as a big program when you look at the offense. You got Kittle, you got Deebo Samuel, you got Christian McCaffrey, an emerging player in Juwan Jennings. How will he be able to ascend to the level that he wants to in that offense? I don't know that he would be able to, but then in addition to that, you have the financial aspect of it, right?
Right.
Because you have Deebo Samuel, who is a very well-paid receiver. Brock Purdy, eventually you're going to have to face the facts with him. 2 more years.
2 more.
Right? Yeah. Before you have to work that situation out. And he's going to get paid. And he deserves it, right? Brock Purdy.
He's a good player.
Say what you want.
Yeah.
He's a good player.
Yeah.
I once called him a cute story, right?
Yeah.
I said it's a cute story. It's made for Disney.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Disney could make money off of it. But the fact of the matter is he's a good player. So you have that. I don't know that this 49ers team is going to be able to pay him that big contract after this 5th-year option, which has him at what, $14 million?
In that neighborhood, yeah.
I trade for that in a heartbeat. And then you look at signing him The thing is, what type of contract is he going to command?
Right.
You know what I mean? And if I'm a team that's going to actually acquire him, I would want to sign him to a deal immediately because I want to get in front of the Justin Jefferson.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying Ayuk is on that level because he's not.
But it resets the market.
Exactly. Jamar Chase is going to want his money soon. Expect T. Higgins. I want to get ahead of that. So I would make the trade if I'm the Titans. I would absolutely make it, and he would come in and be the number 1A with DeAndre Hopkins, and then, D-Hop moves on. You got Burks, whoever you draft. Now you're cooking.
He's a really interesting player to me because, like you said, the production is unquestionably there, right? I mean, 75 catches this year, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. He averaged almost 18 a catch this year, which is a ridiculous number. So the production is there.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting because I've heard people talking about this even in San Francisco, the idea of paying him the long-term contract, and the blowback is, well, how important is he really to what they do in terms of, like, would you take Debo over him? Is George Kittle more important than him? Is Christian McCaffrey more important than him? So if he gets away from that situation and he comes here or elsewhere and is unquestionably the number one guy, what does he look like as the unquestioned number one receiver that everybody on the other side of things defensively is paying attention to? And I don't know what the answer is. My guess is he'd do a pretty darn good job. I mean, you just don't end up with 114 targets and 78 catches, or this year 105 targets, 75 catches. That doesn't just happen. Like, you gotta work to be able to do that. So it is interesting, though, like, if he goes elsewhere and he's going to be the focal point that other teams focus in on, what does that do? How does he handle that as a number one guy in the league?
He consistently beats man coverage.
He does.
That's what you want out of your number one, right? You want to have somebody to do that. But the thing that you kind of have a luxury here with the Titans is if you trade for him, you bring him in, year one, as he's getting his legs up under him, his feet, whatever, you have Hopkins there. You're only going to double Ayuk so much before Hopkins starts saying,
exactly.
like, hey, I'm a problem too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's a luxury there. And then you roll into the following year with however it works. It's a trade that I would absolutely, and I actually went on a rant on talking with TD last week about this because I really felt it was something that they should do. I will throw this in there, though.
Okay.
You got Calvin Ridley. Obviously, 4 years older than Ayuk, but 76 receptions, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. You don't have to trade for him. You sign him. Do you do that?
So, and I think also he would be cheaper, right? Like, Calvin Ridley would certainly be cheaper. Now, the question with him, too, is, and I know last year he ended up playing in all 17 games. So there was the question heading into it, coming off obviously the suspension, but even before the suspension, the injury concerns with Calvin Ridley. He played in all 17 games last year, 76 catches, over 1,000 yards. I think I would probably still go the Ayuk route because I feel like I like the age difference first off, and I love the production that's been displayed consistently. So I would still probably lean Ayuk, but you wouldn't have to give up the draft capital in order to get him, so that is worth considering if you're the Titans.
I agree with you. Ayuk is the better option. That's the next question. What do you have to give up
exactly
if you trade for Ayuk? That's the big question.
Well, I mean, I would assume, wouldn't a first-rounder have to be involved somewhere? Maybe.
You're not giving up 7 overall.
You're definitely not giving up 7.
Hang that phone up immediately.
Could you talk them into a 2025 first-rounder?
Possibly. I mean, if you could go,
do you think it would cost a first-rounder to get him?
It's tough. It's tough. But I mean, you look at what Tyreek Hill, that haul, was a major haul. Ayuk isn't Hill though.
Right.
I think that's the question. I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I wonder if this year's second and next year's first, or this year's second and next year's second. Like, if you could package something up.
If it was, let's say it was this year's second and next year's second, which is a huge price, would you do that if you're Rand Carthon?
It's a heavy price.
This year's second is pick 38 overall.
I know it.
I'm not doing it.
I'll
do. Listen, this is what I would do. I'll go this year's second and next year's fourth.
Okay.
I mean, that's 38 overall. Fourth round pick, I will see what it is, but I'll do that.
I would do that too. To me, we talked about changing the offense up and getting weapons around Levis and seeing what he's got. I mean, this changes immediately, right? Like if you've got Hopkins, you bring in Ayuk, and you take your first round pick 7 overall, and let's say you end up with Joe Alt. Like, just think about the difference that makes already with those three guys. Hopkins staying here, obviously, and then Ayuk and Alt added to the offense. I mean, you're talking about a totally different thing offensively for the Titans at that point.
Yeah, about that because
be fun to watch.
It'd be fun to watch for sure.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Coming up next, a combo rant, a Rob rant and a TD rant together. We got a lot of ground to cover. We'll do that coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Don't make me angry.
Sometimes you have to tell someone to pound sand.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
This is the Rob Rant. Now on Robby and Rexrode.
And here we go. Let's go. With the kid with the train.
It is that time of the day. Time for the Rob Rant here on Robby and Rexrode. You can check it out every morning at 7:45. A combo rant today. A Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport rant. Very much looking forward to this one. Nick was in there giggling, putting together this montage, so I guess he thought that Rexrode bit was funny there.
Plenty of Joe Rexrode rants.
There's a lot to choose from.
No Scott Stapp ones this morning.
We'll have to save it for another time. So, TD, I'm watching the dunk contest kind of on and off. So it's NBA All-Star Weekend, and we talked about the game itself. The Eastern Conference scored 211 points in the game last night, so not a lot of defense being played out there. And the dunk contest, you know, it used to be, I think, one of the highlights of the NBA season, right? I mean, you had Michael Jordan, you had all kinds of people. I mean, Dominique Wilkins going back in the day. I mean, it used to be the thing. And now you've got, and look, no disrespect to Mac McClung, who has now won it for 2 years in a row. Yeah. He's not even in the league. He's a G Leaguer.
Right.
But he ends up in the dunk contest somehow. And look, it's interesting, TD, because I view this a couple different ways. Number one, I hate that like none of the star players really do it anymore. I mean, you don't see LeBron's never done a dunk contest. I mean, it's not like your big stars in today's game really want to do it. And I understand to some degree why they won't do it. And that brings me to point number two, is because I think part of the reason why the dunk contest doesn't really do it for me anymore is we've seen everything, right? Like we've seen like every conceivable type of dunk for the most part we've seen to this point. And that's what they'll tell you too, is like, well, I don't know that I could come up with anything that somebody else hasn't already done, and I don't want to go out there and embarrass myself. So that's kind of the excuse that the star players give as to why they don't want to be in the dunk contest. But it did make – I was watching it over the weekend with guys out there who, like, I've never heard of before.
That's the
and
problem.
it did make me think back to, you know, Jordan and Wilkins and just the star power, Vince Carter back in the day. I mean, some of the great dunk contests that we've seen. And it just feels like those days are gone in the NBA. And it's sad.
even in those old days where it was guys who weren't the top players – Kenny Skywalker, you know, was doing crazy dunks. Harold Miner, Baby Jordan, was doing crazy dunks. It had appeal. Yeah. Now, I'll be honest with you, the dunk contest is second fiddle to the three-point shooting contest. And it's crazy to say that because I remember, man, and I was telling my girl this weekend because I literally turned it off. She's like, "You're not watching?" No, I ain't watching that foolishness. You know what I mean? I turned it off. And I'm like, this is nothing like it used to be. Like, it used to be Saturday, you had to see this. Yeah, you know, it was cool to watch Larry Bird shoot everybody's eyes out. He and Dale Ellis go at it, you know. But you wanted to see Neek, Jordan, Larry Nance, like those guys, you wanted to see them in the Sean Kemp.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's just like there's no star power to it. And like you said, like you got guys in the G League. Like, come on, man. No.
Yeah, not even NBA players. And, like, even recently, like, Blake Griffin was in the dunk contest. And, you know, Blake Griffin was a star player back in the day. Like, it just feels like no star players now even want to entertain it.
They don't
want any part of it. And I don't know how you fix it. Like, it's not like if you're Adam Silver that you can, like, mandate LeBron James go participate in the dunk contest. Yeah. But it's just sad that it feels like one of the great parts of what people have looked forward to on All-Star Weekend. Like, we talk about All-Star Weekend, and we've had this conversation before on the show, but from the NBA to the Pro Bowl to the NHL, like All-Star Weekends in sports to me, unless you're there, like it's one thing, like when they had the NHL All-Star Weekend here, it was a fun time. Like, it's fun if your city's hosting it, and particularly if you're a fan that's never been to one before, like it's a fun weekend. Like the viewing experience of all these games right now, watching them, is just terrible. Yeah. Like there's nothing really to look forward to.
And
it's sad.
Nothing. You're right about that. There really isn't anything to look forward to, and it's a shame because it used to. I remember back in the day, man, like going back, and it was all those Lakers teams with Worthy and Jabbar and Magic, and you had Tom Chambers. from Phoenix on the team, and then, it was Jordan and Pat Ewing and Neek and Dr. J. Like, that was fun to watch.
Yeah.
Now it's just like you see this nonsense. You just like, man, I watched it just out of respect for watching it, knowing like we were going to do this show.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to watch it otherwise.
Well, and like moving forward here, like as some of these guys grow up and get older, like I would love to see Zion Williamson in a dunk contest. Like I would love it. I think it would be awesome. Now, is he ever going to do it? Is the injury risk that's there with it too, especially with him that gets hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Like, are you ever going to see like guys like that do it? Probably not. So, like honestly, like at this point, and they're not going to do this, but if this is going to be what it is, where you got players that aren't even in the NBA competing in the dunk contest, like I just say get rid of it. But I know they're not going to do that.
Yeah,
but like there's
no
appeal to it for me.
Yeah, it's they better get like N1 back in the day, right? And just go find some dunkers, do something, because it's definitely not appealing to me at all.
I saw that this weekend, and I think I watched it for about 2 minutes and said, you know what? I just don't think I can do this.
Yeah,
I don't think I can do it anymore. Now, I will say the 3-point shootout was pretty cool.
Yeah.
With
And
Steph Curry this weekend and
I
Sabrina
like
in there. It was really – I think that was a nice kind of change the pace. I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah, Steph versus Sabrina was cool. Hey, man, Dame, boy.
Man.
That dude he got hot.
He's legit.
I always loved the 3-point contest. Like I said, I like the dunk contest more, back in the day, but – at least you still get the star power in the 3-point. You know what I mean? You got Jalen Brunson in there. You got Trae Young, Dame. I mean, it was a nice cast of characters out there shooting. And then you get the whole separate Steph versus Sabrina. That was fun, too. I'm with you on that.
I'm just proud of you. I mean, you made the drive back from Atlanta yesterday, which I've made that drive many times. It's a frustrating drive to me. And your rant didn't immediately go to traffic. It was good.
It's just because we got to talk a little sports, you know what I mean? But, yeah, now that you created the segue, listen here, man. I am sick and tired of the rubbernecking, right? Like, why is it that a vehicle pulled over on the side of the road? Why is that a magnet for attention?
I don't know.
I just, for the life of me, I don't get it. Like, unless it's like a crazy mashup.
Yeah.
Like, why are you even look? And I don't even want to look at a mashup because I don't want to see something that I'm going to think about at night. You know what I mean?
No.
Just keep your eyes on the prize, and that's what's in front of you. I do not understand. And it's a little bit heavier here in Nashville than other places I've been. I tell you, and the accidents are more abundant here. In Philly, like, I didn't really see accidents like that. You'll see them, but it'd be a bang up and you keep it moving.
Yeah.
Here, it's like one a day.
Yeah.
And it's just it's
constant
crazy
peering over. What's going on over there? Let me slam on the brakes so I can take a look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
And like in the mornings when I'm on daddy Uber duty, when I have my girls and I have to take they go to 2 separate high schools, right? And so I drive right by here and I wave to you guys and keep it going, and then go to one high school, go to the other, and then coming back. And it's just the way people drive just amazes me. I just, for the life of me, cannot figure out why people have to look at a car accident or even a car on the side of the road.
It's driven
There's
me
no
nuts for
reason.
years.
Just keep it moving.
Just keep it going. It's a public service announcement.
Yes.
615-737-1025, our phone number. A nice combo rant between myself and TD. Let's do that one again. I enjoyed that.
Absolutely. I feel better now.
Yeah.
Like I got
off
something off my chest.
A little therapy. Coming up next.
Go ahead.
We'll be joined by Corey Curtis from News 2. We'll get his thoughts on all things Titans. I'm interested to get his thoughts on the Brandon Ayuk part of this, too. We'll get into all that. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. And as we do every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, we welcome in our friend Corey Curtis from News 2 on our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Corey, good morning. How are you doing?
I am utterly spectacular. How are you fellas today?
We are also doing very well. I don't know if we're utterly spectacular, but we're doing very well.
Supremely
as soon as I heard Rexrode wasn't in the building, I was like, this is going to be a good one.
Brought in the pro this morning. Get a little TD action in here.
That's right.
So, Corey, we were talking a few minutes ago about a really intriguing situation in San Francisco. So, Brandon Ayuk is under his fifth-year option, and there's all kinds of scuttlebutt going around about him right now as to whether or not he's going to be back next year and whether or not the 49ers can pay him a long-term deal. Obviously, a connection between Carthon and Ayuk and his familiarity with him there with the 49ers. So if he becomes available, how much interest would be there from your perspective on Brandon Ayuk via trade to come join the Titans?
Well, I mean, I'm interested because I'm interested in good players, and he's a good player. And I think he fits, he fits kind of what this team has been, and that's, physical, and strong, and he's a team guy. So I think he fit a lot of those characteristics. We'll see what Brian Callahan and they all want. The thing that I get angst about is when you dabble in this type of deal, it's like losing two players because you're going to trade. And so you're going to lose a player or two in the draft, and then you're paying on top of it. So you're losing a draft pick and you're paying. So it's like double. You're double damned on this one, because the whole thing about draft picks is those are the guys that balance your salary cap. Those are the guys that you've got for at least 4 or 5 years. And a lot of times with these free agent deals, you don't even see guys to the end of the free agent deal because the way it's structured, they get cut after 3 years or whatever. And so, that's, the long-term projection of it is my concern in a trade. But he's a very good player, and I never have a hard time adding really good players to your football team.
Well, you mentioned free agency. You mentioned the draft. How would you go about addressing the receiver position? Do you think they should go heavy free agency with some of these guys available, or do you think they should lean more on the youth movement and get some draft picks in a group that's very, very deep at the position?
Well, I think they've got to get somebody in the draft. Like you said, it's a deep group, and they need to get some speed, in my opinion. I could be wrong about that, but right. I think they need to get some speed at that spot. And if they could be young, I'm not one who wants to throw Traylon Burks out with the trash. I want to see what he's got still. He has shown glimpses of being a talented football player, and I'd like to see if he can stay healthy. And in an offense that's going to throw the ball over 30 times a game, I think there's going to be opportunity there for him. So, look, if the price was right, and I could get a dude, of course I'm going to look at it. I'm more likely to draft relatively high, round 1 or 2, depending on how things fall, and then go out and get a Boyd or somebody like that, more of a second-tier free agent who can help me.
Corey, everybody's talking about left tackle, obviously, deservedly so, and the Titans are going to have to address that. Wide receiver, I would agree, they're going to have to address. There's a lot of holes on this team, which is why they're picking where they are in the draft. Yep. Where does right tackle fall in line with your priority list this offseason in terms of, obviously it's been a revolving door there. Chris Hubbard was okay before he got hurt there. Nicholas Petit-Frere is, before the suspension last year, who you projected as the long-term starter there. He did not play well when he was in there this year, and then he got hurt. So how do you view where they are with right tackle right now, and how much of a priority is that for you this offseason if you're Ran Carthon?
Well, it's interesting because the tackle positions have become a little more melded to me because of how many teams have good pass rushers on both sides. That you can't treat that position like you used to, where you just kind of used to put a run mauler over there, because now they single that dude out. And like I said, most teams have 2 edge rushers and not one. So I do think you need a bit of a priority on it. But I do think they got to get the left side right first. And I say that because you've got Skoronski over there. If you can get the left side nailed down at the tackle spot and you get a center, you know you're in a good spot. And so then you can ask Bill Callahan to make it happen at right tackle. He's got He's got Petit Frere. He's got Dylan Radens. He's got Jalen Duncan.
Yep.
He's got some bodies over there to work with. You've got another draft. You've got another free agent class. We've seen other teams bring in guys. The Texans brought in George Fant. They paid a little more for him than the Titans were willing to, and that seemed to work out for them. And other teams have brought in guys a little bit later at that spot. I think that's the spot I'm going to lean more on Bill Callahan to say, we will spend the money on the left side. We need you to be the man on the right side. You got to make this happen for us.
Where do you fall to marry both of these concepts we talked about, the receiver and the O-line? Where do you fall on that Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu versus Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors conversation?
Well, this is one where, I'm the oldest guy in the room. I'm 53 years old. I'm from Chicago. I'm black and blue division. So I used to always be offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. I try not to be a dinosaur, okay? I try to evolve in my thinking. And I am much more open to taking a guy who, if I think he is a game changer at wide receiver, then I will do that. If he's truly special, I'm going to do that and go get a tackle in round two. Look, you've got to look at your board and see what's going to be there, or what you believe is going to be there, and is it going to work out? But I'm if you're going to get, and again, this is the best receiver of all time. If you're going to get Jerry Rice, you're going to go get Jerry Rice. If you're going to get Justin Jefferson, you're going to get Justin Jefferson. Nobody's barking at the Bengals for taking Jamar Chase anymore.
So, Malik Neighbors, Odunze, are these guys you take over Joe Olu Fashanu?
You know what? I'm gonna pass on that because I'm not smart enough. I'm not smart enough. I will trust your opinion. I will trust Rand's opinion on that. Would I scoff at taking one of those two guys over Joe Alt? No, I don't think I would. I think both those guys are really good.
Very good.
I don't know if it'll work out, but look, Joe Alt's like 6'8", 330 and moves really well. But we've seen it before.
Hey, listen, Joe Alt, you tell him, hey, brother, you're going to line up right next to Peter Skoronski. He's going to be run left for the next 10 to 15 years. That's what you say, man.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. You get that left side. You get that hammered out, then you know what it's like when you have a corner who can shut down half the field.
Mm-hmm.
You only got to coach half the defense. You just let Dion cover the other side of the field.
You got
and when when Taylor Lewan was in his prime and he could handle Khalil Mack and he could handle Von Miller, it was such a prize for this team because they didn't have to park tight ends next to him. They didn't have to chip. They just said, Taylor, go get him. And Taylor was able to do that, and they were able to help rookies like Jack Conklin, and they were able to help on the interior, when they had, guards that were, kind of second-tier players. And so if you have that left side hammered out like that, yes, you're going to run, but in pass protection, you're good. You guys are it. Or we're going to worry about the right side. You guys have got the left locked down. And there's a whole lot that's beneficial to that, to your quarterback, just like there is to a receiver. So, again, you grade them out and you say which one is better. And I will trust them on which one is better, and then we'll see if they're right or wrong. Because before, like I said, I'd be like, you got to get the offensive line right, and I still believe that largely, but I can be talked into a receiver without question. It's too much of a passing league, and if you don't have guys now who can get separation, which I've watched for years, it really hurts you.
So, Corey, obviously a lot of this conversation heads into those decisions, right? And what Rand Carthon does this offseason and whether or not they pick the right guys. Having said that, just purely on the Levis front, as you watched him play in his first year, now heading into his second year, what do you think needs to improve the most? Like, where are you looking to see Will Levis take that next step heading into next year?
Well, I mean, I think number one, it helps if he can drop back there and not worry about getting killed in 2 seconds.
That would be great.
I think that would help him, develop, his ability, to, do all the things a quarterback's supposed to do, go through his reads, blah, 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 blah. Look, he's going to learn through experience. His accuracy can be a little bit better. And I think that comes with time and timing with his receivers as much as anything. Because remember, he was rolling third string for quite a bit of the time. So, give him a full offseason with these guys. I think that will help his accuracy, as well. And I think also getting to throw the ball more. I mean, I don't know how much they're going to throw the football. I know Joe Burrow throws it a ton. And so I'm looking forward to not seeing 24 passes a game. I'm looking forward to seeing well over 30. And I think, having that experience, I think getting in that rhythm, I think those will all help him grow. I mean, listen, the compete level is there. The athleticism is there. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to be more accurate, and he's got to have some guys to help him out a little bit more too. I think there's no question about that, whatsoever. But I don't know what you guys thought. I was really interested when we met Nick Holtz the other day, and so we met the coordinators the other day. And by the way, Denard Wilson, I have a coaching crush on after listening to him.
Yeah, it makes you want to run through a wall. Yeah.
Well, the moment he quoted George Patton, I'm like, I'm in. All right. If you're going to quote the modern father of tank warfare in the U.S., I'm all aboard. And I'm like, man, they did not do Nick Holtz any favors letting Denard Wilson go first.
Right.
Holy cow, he was unbelievable. But the one thing that Nick Holtz did do was he talked about Will Levis, where when Brian has talked about Will Levis, he's talked in some general terms and some modest terms of liking him, and he's got talent. Nick was just like, yeah, this is why you take the job, because you really believe in this guy. And so I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a little more thought behind Will Levis. There's a little more belief behind Will Levis than maybe they had let out of the bag before. I think Nick in front of the microphone maybe got a little looser with it than they wanted to. I don't know, but it was more than I thought I'd heard before. I could have read too much into that, but I don't think I did.
Corey Curtis joins us every Monday morning at 8 o'clock here on the program. Corey, phenomenal stuff as always. Thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Well, when TD's in the house, I try not to embarrass myself.
Exactly.
That's it. I set the bar really low.
Well, you did a great job of not embarrassing yourself.
Excellent work. Excellent work.
All right. Thanks, fellas. Have a great show.
All right. Corey Curtis, our guest on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your thoughts on what Corey had to say there. Coming up next, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We're going to get into the tackle wide receiver discussion coming up next as well. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Appreciate Corey Curtis from News 2 for being with us in the last segment. Teron Davenport in for Joe today. Taking your thoughts on all things Titans, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. TD, before we get into the tackle wide receiver part of this, we do have a question on the text line I want to get to. It says, it feels like Denard Wilson, whom I'm really excited about, wants the defense to have some interchangeable parts. Can you talk about that and the guys who you'd like to see fit that sort of mold? This is from Joe on the text line. Certainly, as Corey pointed out, I really enjoyed me some Denard Wilson in his introductory press conference last week.
Yeah, they might have to invest in a construction company over there at St. Thomas Sports Park to redo the walls, because there's going to be a lot of running through them. But no, all jokes aside, that's a good question by Joe. I asked Denard Wilson about the versatility, like how he looks at the cornerback position, especially the nickel, because you look nowadays, because there's so much 11 personnel, nickel is almost your base, right? So the question of hey, do you do 3-4 versus 4-3? Hey, it's a cool question, but nickel is really where it's at. So I think the versatility is going to be something. Will Levis flexing like Incredible Hulk. I think the versatility is going to be something that is especially demanded from the secondary.
Yep.
And you look at the safety position. He's worked with Denard Wilson at this. You know, you're talking about Kyle Hamilton, you're talking about Jamal Adams. You look at the flexibility that Hamilton has, whereas you could drop him down in the box to match up against tight ends. He's rangy, that Eric Davis-like range in center field.
Yep.
You know, you have those things. And then you look at the nickel position, some of the cornerbacks that he's worked with. I mean, Jack Rabbit Jenkins when he was a rookie, Tremaine Adams. You look at Darius Slade, James Bradbury, elevated to a Pro Bowl, our first-team All-Pro. I say all that to say, there's things specifically that he's going to want. You got to be able to play left, right, and nickel. And that's something that is mandatory because of how you have the group of corners and how you need to be able to rotate guys, et cetera. So I would see the versatility there. I think they're still going to look for guys like Arden Key, like a Danico Autry, who you could literally line up anywhere in the front and even have them stand-up rushers as well.
So on the tackle front, we've talked about receiver, and by the way, Michael from Madison on the text line says, I don't care about Brandon Ayuk or any of these other receivers' catching skills. How well can they run block? Going back to the Vrabel days. Very well done, Michael. We appreciate it. You can do it. There's no question. On the tackle front, we talked a lot about Joe Alt and Fashanu, obviously.
Yeah.
How deep do you think tackle is in this draft, and how do you view the right tackle part of this too? We're going to get into NPF coming up specifically here in a few minutes, but how do you view where right tackle kind of falls into the things for the Titans as well?
Well, in 2021, there was a record of 7 offensive players, just period, selected in the first 10. You may have 10.
Yeah.
The first 10 picks will probably be offense. 2 of them are very likely to be offensive line.
Yeah.
Overall, you could see 8 to 9 offensive linemen go in the first round, Robby. So it's going to be tough when you look at a team like the Titans if they don't go O-line at 7 to come back around. But, I mean, so your first-round guys, Joe Alt, we talked at length about him, Olu Fashanu. I would really have interest in him if I were the Titans also, just on the strength of Bill Callahan being able to get the most out of that potential. So you have those. If they were to trade back, I would say like that 15 to 25 range. If they trade back to that, I'm really eyeing Keon Coleman, the receiver out of Florida State. But you look at Tyrese Fuaga, right, 6'6", 323 pounds.
Yep.
He's more of a right tackle, and that's the thing that's could be a little bit of an issue if they trade back is that you're going to be more funneled into right tackles. I mentioned Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. They switched him over to left. He struggled a bit. Would I put him there permanently? Probably not. Right tackle, but he's there. You look at Amarius Mims, who he got injured last year, but good gracious, when he played, you talking about catching bodies.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't fair what he was doing. So you got that. J.C. Latham is another one. Again, it's right tackle. Troy Fatuanu is somebody out of Washington. He did play left. You have that. But if you go second round, like Patrick Paul is probably the best out of them. He's my favorite out of Houston. He's very athletic. He's 6'7", 323. He's somebody that I would look at that 38 pick. Jordan Morgan may be there, but it's interesting with him because you have a lot of the similar situations with him that you have with Peter Skoronski, where a lot of people see him as a guard.
Yeah.
I talked to him about the short arms. He was like, man, I played all my life with short arms. Like, I can do this, you know, and I hear you, but, I mean, that is something. But he would be a left tackle. Kingsley Suamaitai, I could never pronounce those Samoan names always kill me. But out of BYU, you know, he's a big athletic prospect that, again, you go back to a guy like Bill Callahan and you have him work with them. Those are guys, you know, that you could get in the second round, maybe even the third. So those are things that you look at.
How big of a drop-off do you think there is after Alt and Fashanu, specifically in the first round?
Yeah, I think it's pretty significant.
Pretty significant?
Yeah, I do.
So
especially at the left tackle position.
I would think, and again, you can't go totally by need when you're talking about draft board, but doesn't that in the back of your mind, if you're Rand Carthon, have to influence you some of if there's that big, if you're on your board, there's that much of a difference between those two tackles and everybody else? Doesn't that have to influence the way you think to some degree?
It influences you some. I mean, they used to say there's two drafts, right? A quarterback draft and a regular draft.
Yeah.
Well, it's also starting to be a protect the quarterback draft and regular draft too, you know. So you do have to consider that. I just think, you know, the left tackle position is so important because what did we talk about with Will Levis earlier? The pocket awareness.
Yep.
And the blind side, he doesn't – you can't just improve that. You know what I mean? So you have to place a priority on protecting that blind side so he doesn't get body rocked the way he did multiple times.
No question about it. 615-737-1025. We'll continue the discussion on the tackle position. Should Nicholas Petit-Frere be the plan at starting right tackle for the Titans this offseason, or should they look to improve that position either via the draft or free agency? We'll get into that with TD coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning, taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025. So, TD, the fact of the matter is the Titans have so many needs this offseason that they're not going to be able to get to them all. Just from a logical standpoint, when you think about the cap space, the draft capital, all those things, and, keeping in mind right now they don't have a third-round pick at the moment. So
Yes.
It's a tough year not to have a third-round pick. There's a lot of needs that they've got to address that it's going to be very difficult to adequately do that with all of them in one offseason. So I'm not sure exactly where right tackle falls into like the priority list. It's not above left tackle. It's not above wide receiver. It's probably not above cornerback in my mind either. So and you could throw in a couple of other positions there that you could make an argument above right tackle as well. But I do wonder, Petit Frere heading into last season, I think was the long-term plan at right tackle. Then he gets popped for the suspension, and then he comes back and he doesn't play very well, and then he gets hurt. So he ended up playing a grand total of 3 games last year. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, it was just a completely wasted lost season from Petit Frere a year ago. Yeah. And based on what I've seen from him, and you're certainly more trained at this than I am, but what I've seen from him at this point, I have not seen a competent starting level right tackle in the NFL. So I said it earlier, and Paul Kuharsky and Joe Rexrode, I think, disagree with me a little bit, which is fine. Like, it's right tackle is up pretty high on my priority list this offseason because I think, as Corey pointed out, those 2 tackle spots are so important in today's NFL with the quality pass rushers that you're dealing with coming from both sides. So my question to you is, given all the different needs that they have, should the plan be for Petit Frere to be the starter heading into camp? Or if you're Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan, do you have to some way, somehow find a way to bring in a right tackle that you feel like can compete and start for you this offseason, given all the other needs that you've got to address this offseason on the books already?
I would absolutely look at signing a free agent right tackle. And to your point, I don't think Nicholas Petit Frere has shown anything to make you say, hey, this guy is the future. I don't think so. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know I'm not, so you can't correct me. Yeah. But you look at Dylan Radins also. He's an option. I think there are focus issues with both of them. Radins with the false starts.
For sure.
And Petit Frere, like, there are times where he just completely, he misses his assignment. Now, I don't know exactly what the scheme was, like what they were being asked to do. So let me say this. I'm not going to say he just completely missed his assignment. It looked like he did.
Yeah.
So let me make that clear because I'm not going to, do that as far as like say a guy is right or wrong, et cetera. But I do think that there are some free agent right tackles you could sign. You mentioned George Fant earlier. He's a guy that you could bring back, right? Or not bring back, but bring in. Chris Hubbard, you could bring him back. So those are options. And then even in the draft, there's guys that you could get later. The right tackle position is important, and it's more important than some people are alluding to because you look at the great offensive lines or even the really good ones. Like, look at how the Eagles addressed it, right? Even back when they took John Runyon from here.
Yep.
It was Trey Thomas, John Runyon. Bookend, nothing to worry about, right? And then they did it again, right? They drafted Lane Johnson, number 5 overall, signed Jason Peters, boom. It's something, or traded him, right? Traded for him. So you do need to address both sides of that. But free agency-wise, I mean, Fant would probably be the best option just looking at the group. He is 31. How do you get 31.6 years old? I don't know, but he guy at a decent number that we know what has happened with injuries, so you have that there.
So what would be more of a priority to you? Would it be addressing right tackle, or would it be upgrading at center from Aaron Brewer? What do you think of that?
That's a good question. I would probably say upgrading at center.
Okay.
And I hate to say it because, Brewer is a guy that I really wanted to see work out, but it just it just didn't seem like it's something that they can move forward with.
Well, it feels like, not to get all stilly on you, but it does feel like the lack of size there is a problem at times for them when you're going up against those defensive tackles with Brewer. And, to have somebody in there with a little bit more oomph to them feels like that could be beneficial. I would go right tackle as more of a priority than center, but I can't argue with people who go the other way. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd like to upgrade all 3 spots. Can you do that in one offseason?
Be
I don't
tough.
know.
Here's the thing why I put center in front of right tackle. I think so. You look at Dylan Radins. You look at Nicholas Petit-Frere. This is a 2nd-round pick and a 3rd-round pick. You look at Bill Callahan. Hey, look, man, can you get something out of these high? Right. Those are high draft picks
for sure.
So I think you try to get something out of that and maximize what he could do there. And then the center position, do you want to invest money? Right, Cody Whitehair got put on the market. He was cut. Do you want to invest money and sign a guy like that, or do you want to? There's a few centers out there that you could sign, and obviously in the draft, a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson, JPJ, out of Oregon, at 38, you could consider it. I wouldn't go that direction, but that is something that could be on the menu.
And this is another example where maybe having a 3rd-round pick would be a great spot to have this year, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and another part of this equation too is when you look at where they're at with their offensive line, and you brought up Bill Callahan, and I'd even throw Jalen Duncan in there too, because obviously when they took Duncan last year, like the physical traits they loved, and trying to bring him along, obviously he was not ready to be a starting left tackle in the league last year when they put him in here at the end of the season. It was just a revolving door, and that was bad. But can Bill Callahan, whether it's with Radins, Petit-Frere, or Duncan, to me, if he could get one of those guys to be able to play at a starting level, that's a big win for this Titans team, because right now I think everybody views all those guys as backups, and it's great to have some depth, and it's great to have quality options at backup that could come in at a pinch for you, but if Bill Callahan could work with one of those 3 to get them to where they could play meaningful snaps for you at a decently high level, that would be great. I don't know that I'm holding my breath on that, but you do have what many people regard as either the best or in the conversation of the best offensive line coaches in the league at your disposal now.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny. I just thought of going to the beauty salon, right? Like I would take my daughters to go, and there will be a sign on the wall that says, I'm a beautician, not a magician.
Yes.
And I think we have to be careful to not make Bill Callahan, and I'm kind of falling into that trap of making him out to be a magician. But you look at the track record that he has, you have to believe that he can get the most out of these guys, So I think the right tackle position, actually, as you mentioned, Jalen Duncan as well, that is a position I would actually absolutely put below center as far as area for improvement.
So to that point, do you think it makes sense to bring Aaron Brewer back and make him more of like a utility guy where he could play guard or center? How do you view the Aaron Brewer back, even if he's not going to be a starter?
Absolutely. I bring him back, and you're my backup for my guard tandem right there. One of those guys go down, boom, plug and play, and that's the way that I would do it. Go back to the role that he was when he first got here. So you have that, and I mean, I would bring back Brunskill as well, to be honest with you, because these are 2 guys I think you could have at an expensive cost, and Brunskill is a excellent locker room guy.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, when you look at the line that didn't play well as a whole, I mean, Brunskill was not like some Pro Bowl player out there, but I thought he was fine for the most part. So, you can't – I know everybody wants to just totally uproot the offensive line and bring in 5 new starters and go with that. You can't do that in one offseason. Yeah. And I will say, the Bill Callahan part of this, the guy that intrigues me the most about Callahan is Skoronski. Working with Skoronski on a daily basis – I think it's fair to say, regardless of what you thought about taking a guard at number 11 overall, I do think you wanted to see a higher level of play from him than you saw in year 1. Now, how much of that was because of what was around him? I think we're going to start to find out. But Bill Callahan working with Skoronski and the jump that he could take from year 1 to year 2 is really intriguing, especially if you do get a guy like Joe Alt on the left side. That could be a real position of strength for you, going from real big weakness to real big strength maybe in 1 year.
Yeah. Now, let's make no mistake about it. protecting the pocket from the interior is of the utmost importance. Look, you go to Tom Brady, you go to Drew Brees, you go to Aaron Rodgers, right? What did Aaron Rodgers always hate? That pocket being pushed back into his lap. All of the premier, they hate that. So there is a priority that you got to place on that guard, center, guard trio there. So I think that is important. And I don't think it was a bad thing to take Skoronski at 11 and play him at guard, to be honest with you.
Well, especially if he turns into a great player. And that's what you're hoping now Bill Callahan can bring out of him. Like, obviously, the ability is there.
Yeah.
And I think everybody recognizes that. Can you bring it out of him on a regular basis? And look, to me, to your point, he's not a magician. He can't work with everybody and turn them into all pros. And it comes down to the decisions that you make. But, I mean, you got to feel great about who's in charge of your offensive line now. And no disrespect to the last two guys who have been here, but I think it's at a little bit of a different level with Bill Callahan.
Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, it's just is what it is. That's the facts.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Your final thoughts on the Titans. Coming up next, we'll take your questions for TD on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5-106.3 The Game. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Teron Davenport, and Nick Keys are here with you. Every time I hear the song, I think of Wild Thing walking out of Major League. Ricky Vaughn, here he comes. Beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the great sports movies.
They gave him some glasses, man. All of a sudden he could pitch.
Just a bit outside.
Yeah.
Taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025, our phone number. All right, so here we are. We're getting closer to free agency, TD, and there's going to be a lot of at the moment, a lot of running backs scheduled to be out there. A lot of running backs either that were tagged last year that are going to be out there and available, or that are hitting free agency under their current deals. So, number one, I'm really interested to see what that does to the market as a whole. We've talked about the plight of the running back for several years now. I don't anticipate that that's changing a ton heading into the offseason. And number two, obviously, a lot of interest here in Derrick Henry and what that looks like. What do you make of, number one, the running back market, because there's a lot of quality guys out there, and number two, how that affects what the number could be and what we could see in terms of Derrick Henry, his interest level, and the number that he's offered out there.
You know, Derrick Henry remains a unicorn.
He does.
I think he is that guy that a team will invest money in, whether it's the Titans or not. It remains to be seen, but I think Baltimore is a team you have to – Baltimore and Buffalo, these are two teams where I think they're hitting desperation levels. I think Buffalo a little more than Baltimore because
Agreed.
John Harbaugh is a little better entrenched than Sean McDermott is. But if I'm Sean McDermott, like I'm talking to him like, listen, man, we need – and you heard Cook – Henry and Cook talking about the wings in Buffalo, where to go at the Pro Bowl. But no, seriously, I think those are teams that could get in the way of a Titans bringing Derrick Henry back. If I'm Rand Carthon and the crew, I say to Derrick, listen, man, you know, we want you back. We have a certain number. Any offer you get, please bring it back to us. Give us a chance to match it. We may match it, but if we can, we will.
Do you think Henry, in his heart of hearts, wants to be back here as his top priority, or do you think he has reached the point where he's looking around and saying, all right, yes, I want to get paid, but I also want to go to a place where I think I can win a Super Bowl? How do you view how he kind of is approaching this free agency?
I think he's torn. Having a new coaching staff in here, I think that may push him over the edge to being willing to leave, to be honest with you, because we know his relationship with Mike Vrabel was extremely close. His relationship with Tony Deuce, you know, even though that was the tight ends coach last year, that was very close. So you do have that. I think in the end, Henry does move on. Buffalo, Baltimore, that's where I see him going. Dallas is a pot, because you talk about desperation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Mike McCarthy.
Desperate as it gets.
Yeah, I know. I know that day of that game, the night of that game, I was on Sirius XM, and I'm like, hey, listen, you know what? And, you know, I'm not one to say fire the coach.
I know it.
But I said fire him.
And somehow they didn't.
Yeah.
It's still amazing to me. I mean, Henry's out there. Josh Jacobs is going to be out there. Tony Pollard, Saquon, Austin Eckler. There's a lot of really intriguing names at running back. Gus Edwards from Baltimore scheduled to be out there. DeAndre Swift. Like, there's a lot of really intriguing running back names out there. And if you don't get Derrick Henry back here, like, if you're the Titans, do you have interest in one of those other guys to come in and be that complimentary piece with Spears, or is it going to be the Spears show as a full-time back?
I would consider Gus Edwards.
Yeah?
I would, because he'll be like, that's the dude that you just say, man, run into the wall, and he'll do it. You know what I'm saying? And I would consider him for your short yardage situation. But to me, I'm going to make a lot of Tennessee people happy. Jalen Wright.
He's pretty good.
Got to have him.
Yeah.
Bigger back, home run ability. He would be a perfect match to Tajay Spears. Perfect. That's who I go after.
I'm interested to see where he goes. Where he's going to end up going in the draft. Again, another example, TD, where it'd probably be great to have a third-round pick.
Bingo. Yeah.
Like I do, like, and that's where the idea of, like, if Joe Alt is off the board, like, I said it the other day, if you're the Titans, you need elite talent. Like, this roster is desperate for elite talent. So because of that, I find it difficult to believe that they're going to trade back, even if Alt's gone off the board there, because I would think you'd still have Neighbors or a Dunze or Bowers or somebody.
There's going to be an elite player.
There's going to be an elite player. Yeah. So I don't think you trade back when you have an opportunity to get an elite player. But the idea of getting more picks would be intriguing to me if I'm the Titans.
You only get so many more picks.
Yep.
Because that was the big thing coming out of the Senior Bowl is, okay, NIL it murdered day 4.
It did.
Or day 3 rather. It made the 5th round and down like, oh. You can still draft on traits, but it's not as deep as it used to be as far as those juniors, they're going back.
Yep.
So you have that. But I'll say this about the 3rd round pick, and it would be good for the Titans to have it, but, they used it to be able to go up and get Levis, and I think they could be in a good situation the next 2 to 3 years at the quarterback position. So it evens out. It's an opportunity cost,
No question about it. TD, it's been a lot of fun, man.
Oh,
Appreciate you taking time to be with us.
Yeah, we got to do this again.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have you back in, and TD is going to be with us on Friday, as he always is, at 8 o'clock to talk shop once again. Appreciate you taking time to be with us today. Rexrode, scheduled to be back tomorrow. We'll see if he makes it back from Vegas. That's going to do it for us today. Chase and Big Joe is coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3, The Game.